Morning, everyone. I'd like to begin by thanking and acknowledging the various leaders who are standing with me now. Superintendent David Brown, Deputy Superintendent Barbara West, Deputy Chief Ernie Cato II, Arena Karen Winters, the founder of Justice for Families. There you are. Michael Harrington of Network 49, and Alderman Chris Taylor Farrell, the chairman of the Public Safety Committee. We are all here today to announce Chicago's latest steps on the road to police reform. This is a road that began more than 4 years ago when I was president of the Police Accountability Task Force and president of the Chicago Police Board. It has continued with new strength and commitment in the 12 months since I became mayor. And it advances now with today's announcement and the moment we are in. As part of our commitment to working with police and community leaders, local advocates, and public safety experts, I am proud to announce the launch of the Chicago Police Department's Use of Force Community Working Group. This group will comprise 21 diverse community members ranging from residents, students, experts, lawyers, advocates, and elected officials that will review and revise all of CPD's use of force policies. The process of forming the group began earlier this year as part of our consent decree effort and was built in collaboration with the CPD and the Community Coalition for the Consent Decree to reflect both the full diversity of our city and the lived experiences of communities most impacted by these issues. It will be co-chaired by Ms. Winters and CPD Deputy Chief Cato. Meanwhile, members from CPD's Research and Development and Training divisions will be providing overviews of the policies and making themselves available to the working group members to ask questions or to obtain clarity. Once the group's work is complete, they will send their recommendations to the Executive Steering Committee for review and comment. Ultimately, our goal is simple: create better policies and better training for our officers in order to empower them to address situations appropriately and to prevent incidents stemming from excessive force in the future. And the best way to do that is by making sure that the community has a seat at the table at the beginning of this process and that everything that we do reflects the community interests and needs. Now, I'd like to pause for a moment and remind everyone of the use of force dashboard we created earlier this year to provide the public with data on use of force incidents over the last 5 years. You can find that right now by visiting chicago.gov/UOF, or use of force. As I mentioned earlier, this effort is simply the latest step on our road to reform that began over 4 years ago, a mission which we have doubled down on since I became mayor, and a mission that has only accelerated since the murder of George Floyd, and accelerated further here in light of what happened last week at Congressman Bobby Rush's office. As I said last week, that means taking the FOP head on and ensuring the police union contract represents our city's values, all of our city's values, and requiring licensing for police officers once and for all, just as we do with so many other professions. And there are a lot of other important discussions happening across the nation on police reform. And I truly believe that we as a city have a lot to offer to that national narrative, because so much of what we're hearing has already gotten started right here in Chicago. We've taken steps to make sure our officers are crisis intervention team trained, that our officers are equipped with body-worn cameras, that de-escalation is a regular part of officer training, not just for new recruits. And that list is long and goes on. These are measures that came about as a result of the righteous outrage that arose in response to the murder of Laquan McDonald by police officer Jason Van Dyke, and which led to serious and important steps in building the trust between our police and communities that is the cornerstone of our vision for public safety in Chicago. Police officers can never do this alone. We will only have true public safety when the community is engaged and involved in charting the course for public safety on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. As we move forward The steps we'll be taking on our road to reform will continue to build not only on the Police Accountability Task Force recommendations, but on the consent decree as well. I truly believe that the consent decree gives us a unique opportunity, maybe a once-in-a-generation opportunity to transform everything about policing in Chicago. These steps that we will take also include bringing the community into the police academy as teachers, providing district training on neighborhood history from the community's own perspective so that officers who work in a particular district have cultural literacy about the rich, nuanced history of a particular area. Expanding programs that provide youth-led neighborhood exposure and education, like we've seen with My Block, My Hood, My City tours, as well as reforms to improve officer wellness, mandating crisis intervention and procedural justice training, delivering additional de-escalation tools for officers and community members, and undergoing a new recruit program on police community relations and community policing. We need to make all of these things real and meaningful and substantive, and we will. And as I told Superintendent Brown and the entire city of Chicago, I want to see some of these specific measures implemented within 90 days. Our city needs it, and our people are rightfully demanding it. It's our job as public servants to get it done and see it through. And we will do exactly that. I now would like to invite Superintendent Brown to the podium to provide some additional remarks. Superintendent?
Thank you, Mayor. And to the people of Chicago, we hear you. Chicago Police Department has been at every protest throughout the city since the tragic death of George Floyd in Minnesota. We've been there to keep people safe as they exercise their First Amendment rights. We've been there to protect businesses and property from those who use this period of civil unrest as a license to steal and vandalize our beautiful city. We've also been listening. CPD has heard the loud cries demanding police reform. We have heard from people who are hurt, angry, and afraid. There is a roadmap to police reform already in existence for Chicago. This consent decree spells out a series of mandatory improvements that are being overseen by a federal judge. These reforms were created with input from Chicago residents across the city, as well as from our own officers who demanded better training, supervision, and mental health support. As the mayor stated a few weeks ago, we will also begin introducing additional reforms over the next 90 days that will impact the quality of training and cultural competency throughout the Chicago Police Department. One example of our dedication to accountability and transparency is the Use of Force dashboard. As the mayor mentioned, this online tool gives the public a glimpse at use of force incidents over the past 5 years. Use of force incidents are down 14% compared to last year, 14%, and down 34% compared to 2015. While these statistics are encouraging, we must do more to ensure that the voices of our neighbors and residents are being heard when it comes to developing policies that guide when and how we use force to keep Chicagoans safe. Today we are here to announce that the Use of Force Community Working Group is up and running. This working group was planned months before protesters took to the streets across the country. The first meeting was held as a community building and healing session on Tuesday. The official business begins this week. I want to thank the working group members for their time and effort. This is a space where we begin the difficult work of bringing meaningful change to our department and our city, and ensure that our policies are reflective of the communities we serve. I've said it before, the consent decree will remain a baseline, not a ceiling, for our efforts to implement true change throughout our department. I would like to now introduce Deputy Superintendent Barbara West, who will explain more about the details of this working group. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent and Mayor Lightfoot. As Deputy Superintendent for the Chicago Police Department, Office of Constitutional Policing and Reform, I oversee the department's efforts toward compliance with the consent decree and overall reform. The consent decree paints a path for us to improve in Chicago and requires CPD to ensure that communities' voices are heard and reflected when we revise or create policies that will guide law enforcement efforts throughout our city. I have proudly served with the Chicago Police Department for over 25 years, and I can tell you that the way Chicago police officers are trained is vastly different from when I started and entered the academy. We recently increased the amount of annual in-service hours to 32 hours in 2020, and that will actually increase to 40 hours in next year. With that said, we must remain dedicated to always improving the quality of training our officers receive, especially when it comes to use of force. Earlier this year, CPD asked for volunteers for its Use of Force Community Working Group as the department held 4 conversations meeting across the city in February. Just as I expected, Chicago did step up. 20 working group members, each with different backgrounds, neighborhoods, and walks of life, will help shape CPD's use of force policies to ensure they are reflective of a variety of lived experiences and community perspectives. The Use of Force Working Group will meet virtually on a weekly basis over the next 8 weeks and will be co-chaired by Arewa Winters and Deputy Chief Ernest Cato. As an executive committee member, which consists of Superintendent Brown, the First Deputy Riccio, we will receive the working group's recommendations. And I just want to thank all the working group members for taking time out of their busy schedules over the next several weeks to help us ensure that our use of force policies are reflective of the communities that we serve. I want to promise you that this time that we spend working with this working group, that CPD's use of force policy and training will not be wasted. We know the value of these conversations, and we know that appropriate use of force is more than just a policy. When police use force appropriately, it is a way to build trust within a community. A bad incident not only shatters the trust of a department within a city, but it casts a shadow over law enforcement nationwide. The concepts of sanctity of life and de-escalation serve as the cornerstones of our own use of force policies, and we must never stray away from these core principles. Our officers are already trained to de-escalate tense situations before the use of force becomes necessary. The voices of Chicago deserve to be heard, and we are here to listen, and we are willing to change. I would now like to welcome Arewa Karen Winters, who will play a very critical role as the co-chair of our Use of Force Working Group. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I just want to send a congratulations out to my grandson, Tafa Bamba Ibrahim Asila, who will be graduating tomorrow from 8th grade from the Chicago Free School. Good morning to my beautifully broken city. May peace and love be upon you. And I will continue to say that until I see racial equity in all places for all people, and our city looks like one city. Maybe I'll find some way to build on all the order that is coming out of the chaos, especially those of us kissed by the sun and being most impacted, affected, and infected by police violence. My deepest and most sincere love goes out to the Floyd family and to the city of Minneapolis. I am so sorry that on Memorial Day, in this year of perfect vision, the country watched and now the world has seen white supremacy and racial inhumanity under the cloak of policing intentionally cut off the breath of George Floyd, ultimately ending his life. They tried to silence a gentle giant and woke the spirit of another revolution. His death has caused America to move from a single lens view of policing to a panoramic one. Communities across the nation and the world have cried out in anger and rebellion, what we have always believed and known to be true, yet unrealized by so many, that Black lives matter. The announced function of the police to protect and serve the people becomes the grotesque caricature of protecting and preserving the interests of our oppressors and serving nothing but injustice. There are no They are there to intimidate Blacks, to persuade us that their violence that we are powerless to alter the conditions of our lives. They encircle the community with a shield of violence too often, forcing the natural aggression of the Black community inwards. That's from Angela Davis. And so I just like to be, so I'm not a representative of the city. I'm not a representative of the police department. I'm a representative of the community, of the people, and those impacted, because I lost someone I love to police violence here in the city. So my tone may be always different, but one thing I will do is stand in my truth and be honest about some things. I was invited here 3 times to be introduced, and the last time I was bumped for State Rep Bobby Rush, and when I saw that interview, I was infuriated. I was infuriated because I've seen videos, and for that video of them lounging in his office and drinking coffee and eating popcorn did not incense me. But videos that I had through my phone that incensed me was seeing one of my Liberator sisters in a peaceful protest, her and her daughter being cursed and beaten by police. That incensed me, and I cried. What incensed me was getting a video of me, a young lady, Mia, Tranika, and Kim, in the Brickyard Mall as they were dragged out of their car windows shattered, and they were beaten by police. That was something that incensed me. And Kim Fox were asking to drop charges against those young ladies for whatever ridiculous things that came out of it, because they were grieving the loss of a loved one, and I believe a grandmother, and our condolences go out to you. Our own police board president was beaten, and now himself a survivor of police violence here in this city. And if you need a list of us to help you create a list of police that should be fired or charged with something, the mother of Chantel Brooks, her 15-year-old son, Michael Wesley, was killed by CPD officer Kevin, I can't pronounce his name, looks like Parashkowitz, in June of 2013. That same officer was left out on our streets, and he killed another young man. I can't mention his name. I haven't spoken to his mother, and to my understanding, he is still on our police force. Other cities are firing them, and here they get 30 days desk duty, and then they return back to the streets in our communities, as far as I'm concerned, psychopaths with guns. So I am infuriated. I am furious. I am Arewa Najimi Kua, Karen Winters, born in Lawndale, raised in Austin on the west side, which I now call Fred Hampton City, whom himself, a young political servant, chairman of the Black Panther Party, executed in his sleep by Chicago police as he slept next to his pregnant wife. I know it was his girlfriend, but I respectfully refer to her as his wife. I now live in Washington Park, raised by 2 phenomenal parents. My father, whom himself was a security guard for many years, and my nephew was killed on what would have been his 84th birthday. A loving, caring man who taught me the importance of protecting people. My mother, Mildred Lindsay, was a nurse until she retired. A loving woman, compassionate woman who taught me the importance of healing and caring for people. And I grew up with 3 brothers who taught me how to fight physically, mentally, and intellectually. So the day after Sean Hitz murdered my nephew, I founded the 411 movement for Pierre Laurie. And because I knew that we were going to have to fight, and the decision was mine as to how we were going to fight. And our motto is fighting for justice and planting seeds of hope. Our mission is to help other families, and our efforts have attracted the grassroots organizations such as Black Lives Matter Shy. I'm not the founder of Justice for Families. I'm a lead organizer. I'm a board member of Women's All Points Bulletin. We attracted the NAACP and the Civilian Police Accountability Council, among many others. And I believe on Monday I was appointed as co-chair. And so in closing, I would just like to say that I will serve in integrity, I will stand in truth, and I remember that these groups were formed because of our coalition, because of the Campbell plaintiffs, and in this trilogy between myself and the mayor and the superintendent, I have more power because I can go straight up to the federal judge to get enforcement. So in closing, I would like to say the difference is that raw and powerful connection from which our personal powers are forged. We have been taught to either ignore our differences or to view them as causes for separation and suspicion rather than as forces for change. Without community, there will be no liberation, only the most vulnerable and temporary agreement made between an individual and her oppression. Survival is learning to take our differences and make them strengths, and that's Audre Lorde. Thank you, and I love you, and I am honored to be the first ever co-chair in Chicago and perhaps the country. They say we have made history, and all I have to say is all power to the people. Oh, and now I'll introduce the Alderman Christopher Telefero, 29th Ward.
Good morning. Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
Superintendent Brown. Over the last few days, or last few weeks rather, and even this morning, it's been very saddening to hear so many folks truly express how they felt about a profession that I've come to love ever since I was a child, and one that I endeavored to become and be a part of. Reform must happen. Reform is happening here in the city of Chicago. It's happening here in the state of Illinois, and it's happening across this great country that we live in. Reform must happen. And that's why I stand here this morning in support of Mayor Lightfoot and in support of Superintendent Brown in expressing that we cannot wait another day to bring police reform. We can't wait another month, and we can't wait another year to bring effective police reform. I commend Mayor Lightfoot for over the years she's been in office, just over a year, for continuing to bring reforms that's going to be effective and that's meant to change the way that we see the Chicago Police Department, the way that we see policing across this state, and the way that we see policing across this country. It's our responsibility. It's the responsibility of the committee that I serve on, the committee that I chair, and the responsibility of my colleagues to bring a police department that each and every one of you can be proud of. One that you can talk and say that we are the gold standard in the city of Chicago when it comes to policing and when it comes to accountability. So I stand in support of the mayor and continue to bring efforts that will help to restore trust in the men and women that serve this great city, because their service will not go in vain. So I honor the responsibility that I have, and I look forward and commit to ensuring that from a legislative perspective, we will continue to present a police department that you can be proud of. Thank you, Mayor. Mm-hmm. And I believe the mayor will be taking questions at this time.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First question comes from...
Can you actually introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Kai Martin. I'm with NBC5.
Okay.
And I'll be representing a lot of my colleagues here today. Okay. Fran Spielman wonders, Chicago Police's use of force policy was revised a few years ago. I believe you referenced that yourself after the Laquan McDonald case. And she mentions that appeared exhaustive. So why is this needed so
soon after?
Yeah, so soon after what she says.
This is part of the requirements of the consent decree and having this large, diverse group. So we're happy to engage in the discussion. You're right that the use of force policy was revised. It was following the recommendations of the former Department of Justice individuals who came in and did a pattern and practice investigation at the very end of the Obama administration, and we followed on with that and revised it. But we will see if those revisions hold the test of time, and this is another opportunity for the community to be involved, and we believe that that's important.
So is there I'm sorry.
Unfortunately, we only have time for 2 more.
Oh, okay. Just really quick on the consent decree. So is there an end date on this? Is it open-ended with
No,
the feds,
there's not a specific end date.
Okay.
I think that the parties originally envisioned that the consent decree would be over in 5 years. I think that's incredibly ambitious, but we have redoubled our efforts to make sure that we're meeting the deadlines and that we're making progress. And as the superintendent himself just, I think, rightfully said, the consent decree is a floor, not a ceiling. There's many more things that are not covered by the consent decree that we will be working on as part of reforming the police department.
Okay.
Last 2.
Okay, so a couple of reporters have asked to go slightly off topic and talk about the incident from Monday, June 1st from Congressman Rush's office.
Okay.
So the officers and some FOP representatives say that they were directed by someone from Rush's office to come protect it, not during the looting, but at a different time. Who made that call, if you know, and are the officers lying about that timeline?
I believe that allegation is just simply not true.
Okay.
Last question.
Okay, all right, let's see. Kelly Bauer from Block Club Chicago, kind of pivoting here a little bit off topic, but getting back to social distancing and as Chicago continues to reopen. She noted there were jam-packed patios, the open streets, pilot programs that she saw. People weren't wearing masks, walking in the middle of the streets. She's asking, are you concerned about how Chicagoans are re-entering outdoor dining? And her follow-up is, would you go out and eat at a patio?
I ate at a patio yesterday, one that had proper social distancing, and where we see that those rules are not being followed, we're not going to hesitate to talk initially, and if the talk doesn't work, then start fining the restaurants, and if necessary, close them down. We all have to remember, COVID-19 hasn't magically gone away because of the events of the last 2 weeks. It is absolutely very much part of our presence. And whether we continue to make progress as we have over these last 10 weeks depends upon people still adhering to the social distancing rules. And I understand there's a lot of enthusiasm on the part of restaurants and patrons to get back out, to enjoy the great restaurant scene here in Chicago, but we absolutely have to do that, abiding by the rules and regulations that we have put in place around social distancing, wearing masks. In my view, it's foolish to be going out in public, particularly in a social gathering like a restaurant, and not wearing masks. And so we're going to continuing to preach that gospel because it's absolutely necessary to keep people safe, and it's our expectation that those restaurants will adhere to this guidance. It makes sense for the public, it makes sense for their workers, and we're going to insist that that happen, or we're not going to see other restaurants come online, and those who are consistently violating the rules are going to suffer the consequences. We've got to keep diligent and keep people safe. COVID-19 is still here. We're still seeing 200 plus new infections every day. People are still dying from COVID-19. It is foolish to think that just because the sun is shining, the weather is warm, that magically COVID-19 has not gone away. If you look at other states across the country who didn't have the stringent stay-at-home rules that we did, who opened up way too quickly without guidance, what we're seeing in every single one of those states is a huge surge in cases, and some of them are actually reporting the highest incidence of new cases that they've had this entire year because they did not manage the reopening correctly. We do not want that to happen in Chicago, but it's really dependent upon every person taking individual responsibility and doing this the right way. And I surely hope that people will. COVID's not gone, it's still here.
Would you share the name of the restaurant that you ate at?
I don't think I need to do that.
Okay, all right. And then just the people to log on for use of force to view some of these incidents. You mentioned this
Yes,
dashboard module. Do you have that available?
Yes, I do. Hold on, let me find it in my notes. It is chi.gov/UOF, use of force. chi.gov/UOF.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a